Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Many of you were here Ash Wednesday. We had about 50, I think, in attendance. And I went home later that afternoon to break my fast, and I opened my refrigerator with great anticipation, and it was empty. But when I came down a couple of years ago, I had brought some saran wrap around Christmas, which was red. And there were a couple of items that were wrapped in red saran wrap in the refrigerator. Now, the problem with items wrapped in red saran wrap is that they feel as though they've been languishing there since Christmas. But I opened them, and fortunately I had some mushroom soup and some cauliflower salad from Mercado Sano. I had fasted all of 24 hours. Woohoo! Jesus, in today's gospel, is at the end of a 40-day fast. No wonder he's having visions. I remember in university, at the height of possibly misplaced piety, deciding that I should fast 2 weeks. And I'm stubborn, and I did. And at the end of those 2 weeks, to about the second, I sprinted up to the nearest pizza joint. And upon reflection, I thought the whole experience, apart from the pizza, was completely unedifying. So I have not fasted 2 weeks since. A day here and there is about my limit. The temptations that Jesus experiences at this moment of vulnerability, with the pizza parlor calling to him from the other side of the desert, are all about motives and methods as he engages his ministry. Do you remember T.S. Eliot's line in Murder in the Cathedral? The last temptation is the greatest treason, to do the right deed for the wrong reason. Preacher Baudrillard of Terrebonne Parish, Cajun Baptist Church, and Pastor Thibodeau of Louisiana Full Gospel, right across the road, were together pounding signs into the wet marshland in front of their white steepled buildings. And the first sign read, "The end be real near." And the second sign read, "Y'all turn yourself around right now." And the third sign read, "For it be too late." And a car sped by, and a guy leaned out the window and said, "Religious nuts." And he continued around the bend, and from around the bend in the road, the two preachers heard the screeching of tires, followed by a tremendous splash. And Pastor Thibodeau turned to Pastor Baudrillard, and he says, "Do you think maybe the sign should just say, 'The bridge out'?" So we learn today that the bridge is out for humankind. The road is not straight. If we're not careful, we're going to end up in the drink. Temptations are not so much about things that are obvious and overt. We generally know when overt and obvious sins are tugging at our sleeves. The things that really trip us up are deeper motives, improper methods, distorted thinking, justified. Those are the things that contort the soul. And so the temptations of Jesus mirror those of the mythical Adam and Eve. The desire for personal security, proof of God, a successful destiny. All things which can be good if pursued in the right way, and all things that can lead us to ruin if our motives and our methods are unsound. There are tales of warning in every culture. You remember Homer's Odyssey. In Homer's Odyssey, the seafarer Odysseus leaves Troy. After the Trojan War has come to an end, he's going to sail back to Greece. And during that treacherous journey, the ship comes to an island, and Odysseus dispatches a scouting party, but the scouting party fails to return. So Odysseus gathers fresh scouts and sets out to see what went wrong, and he finds the first scouting party feasting among the lotus eaters. As soon as they tasted that honey-sweet fruit, Odysseus tells us, they thought no more of coming back to us with news, but chose rather to stay there with the lotus-eating natives and chew their lotus and goodbye to home. I brought them back to the ships by main force. They were grumbling and complaining, and when I had them there, I tied them up and stowed them under the benches. Then I ordered the rest to hurry up and get aboard, for I did not want them to have a taste of the lotus and say goodbye to home. That's not far off from the second of the creation stories in Genesis, which we heard today. The point of the Genesis tale of how the bridge came to be out has a lot in common with Homer's tale about how well-intentioned people are lured off course by compelling but ruinous distractions. Adam and Eve and Odysseus' crew have not fixed their internal compass, and so they are quickly put off course. The fruit of the Garden of Eden and the fruit on the Aegean island are all it takes for them to forsake true north. There's a wonderful old estate in Santa Barbara, where I used to live, called Lotus Land. Beautiful gardens. If you ever get again to Santa Barbara, go wander through them. And Southern California was long ago christened the land of the lotus eaters. But our climate really isn't all that different here, is it? Gringos and Miguelenses share with Southern Californians a certain sybaritic reputation. Live in the present, drink life's cup to the dregs, enjoy the pleasant weather. In San Miguelenses, you might find today's texts on temptation quaint, or harsh, or inapplicable. The Christian virtues of prudence and fortitude, of self-control, of patience, of justice and humility aren't spoken of much anymore. In fact, many people seem to admire the imprudent, impetuous, the impatient, the self-promoting. Temptation is so old school. But Homer's Odysseus knew what was important. It wasn't the comfortable island or the alluring lotus. Those were distractions. The important thing was home. The soldiers had to maintain clarity of vision regarding the right goal if they were ever going to get themselves back to Athens. The loss of Eden, Homer tells us, is a failure of vision. It's a lowering of sights. You have to be ready to fight for vision and clear-sightedness. You have to be willing to fight with yourself for those things. And the Christian virtues go a long way to saving individual lives and shoring up foundering cultures. And that's why we find Jesus fasting 40 days in the wilderness, struggling against himself and against lesser visions for his unfolding life. If Jesus is going to be useful to God and others, if he's going to fulfill his potential and achieve his calling, he needs clarity about what is important. Is it power? Is it material wealth? Is it personal gratification? What is the good purpose to which he must dedicate himself? Any temptation, an apple in a garden, a lotus on an island, all the kingdoms of the world, any good thing can become a fatal distraction if it causes us to lower our sights. In the literature of the Western world, both sacred and secular, temptation is a frequent theme. Struggles are epic. People sensed a war within themselves, a war with avarice and lust and sloth and complacency, with evil and mediocrity that would prevent them from achieving their best. These themes are not as common in contemporary Western literature. Before you can experience peirazo, the Greek word that means being put to the test, which we translate as temptation, before you can be tempted to lower your spiritual sights, your sights have to have been set high. You have to have a spiritual vision before you recognize the need to fend off distractions that would divert you from your goal. There is a paucity of spiritual vision in many lives, and spiritual vision has diminished in our cultures, so we no longer experience being put to the test as keenly as we once did. We have eaten the proverbial apple. We have settled in with the lotus eaters. That is the danger illustrated by those metaphorical first human beings, Adam and Eve. You know the Hebrew for Adam? The Hebrew for Adam is Adama, which means earth. Do you know the Hebrew for Eve? Neither do I. But I think there must be a Hebrew word for she who gets thrown under the bus. Eve gets the blame. She's the problem. Cover her up. Put her in a hijab. Stow her away in the back room. Adam and Eve are adrift and directionless. They have settled for a distraction, and they blame one another, just as we settle for security and affluence and position, just as we blame Democrats or Republicans or immigrants or anybody else. It is so much work to pursue a purposeful life. It requires sorting through our motives. And that's what Lent is for. It's to help us clarify our purpose and raise our sights and strengthen our vision in cultures that value character less than they once did. The church has an opportunity to put a light on a lampstand. What do you have your heart set on? What vision rules your life? Until you answer that question, you will just ramble along from one shiny apple to the next. Once you know that answer, you may find, like Jesus, that hard tests begin to come your way. Because in Matthew's story of the temptation, Jesus had to wrestle for his identity. It didn't come handed to him on a plate. When we say that Jesus was sinless, we're not saying that the man never made any mistakes. We're saying that he caught God's vision for his human life and lived into that vision with a fierce and complete passion. The temptation for Jesus was to become some other, more recognizable kind of leader than a servant Messiah that he was called to be. And all of us forget that God has a claim on us, and that to be claimed people means that we have to discern a life course that will be uniquely ours. If we forget our identity, if we chase the shiny apples, if we chew the lotus, then goodbye to home. Goodbye to a meaningful life guided by uncomfortable virtues like prudence, fortitude, self-control, patience, justice, and humility. So this Lent, Christ would lead us back to the ship by main force as we grumble and complain all the way, and he'll tie us down and stow us under the pews, the way Odysseus stowed his crew under the shipboard benches. This Lent is a time to raise our sights, to get ourselves a vision. And maybe we'll come out of Lent's 40-day wilderness hungry, not for pizza, not for lotus, but for lives that make a difference. Hungry for God's vision, famished for spiritual meat, ready to struggle for things that really matter, because it makes all the difference in the world that we know what those things might be, and that we set our sights on them and seize the days given into our care.